And I'm going to broadcast. So, hello folks, my name is Andy Port. I'm the Director of Planning and Development of the City of Newburyport. I'm acting as the Zoom host and technical moderator for tonight's public meeting. If you have any questions or comments, we have an ability to do that during the public comment period with the Zoom raise hand feature as shown on the slide that you see before you right now. So I'll leave it to the meeting host. We have with us this evening, Jordy Vining, who is the Senior Project Manager for the City of Newburyport, Stephanie Danielson, who works for Beta. They are the consultant who's helping us with the open space and recreation plan update, and Marta Nover, who is also with Beta. We have been, as well as Lise Reed, who is the Parks Director, who unfortunately isn't with us at the moment. She probably has another meeting conflict at the moment. She is part of the team. We're working together to update the plan. So with that, I'll pass it over to Jordy, who's project manager for this project, and Stephanie Danielson for Beta project manager, who will provide a presentation of the plan process we have right now, and then we can open up to your comments.
And Andy, do you want to just give a quick overview about the your process of raising hands and recognizing and so forth?
Yes, thank you. So the folks I've presented on the screen for anybody who's using the view, just the fact that there's a raise hand button in Zoom. So if folks want to just use your mouse and go down to the bottom of your screens, what you'll find is when you mouse over the bottom of the screen, there's a raise hand button. And if you just click that button, it'll change the color of the hand, and that'll notify us that you're interested in speaking. And so when we get to the end of the presentation and we open up for comments and suggestions and ideas that you all may have, I will then as host just one by one go through our attendance list and allow you to speak. Just in fairness to all, we would ask folks to limit their comments to 2 minutes. That's typically a rule that we use when we have tight meetings. At this meeting, it doesn't look like we have a very large agenda or a number of participants at the time. So, so I'm pretty flexible on that. But I just ask folks to just kind of stick to what your comments are. That way others can speak as well.
Okay, very good. So again, this is Jordy Vining, Senior Project Manager, working with Andy in the planning office. And I'm going to just give a very, very quick overview and then turn it over to our consultants at Beta. But this, the open space plan, open space and recreation plan, this is an update. Our existing plan is dated from 2012, and the state sees these plans as valid for 7 years, 7-year cycles. So they need to be updated within that time frame in order to, among other things, be eligible for a certain number of state grants for park renovation and land acquisition. The city has applied on a number of occasions and secured these grants over the years, which has helped a number of parks and open space acquisitions over the past couple decades. This initiative has been supported by a grant from the Community Preservation Act through the CPC and the City Council, which allowed us to hire Beta as a professional consultant to do a thorough update of the project, of the report and the plan. And the timing of this has coincided, unfortunately, with the pandemic and the working remotely and isolated at home and all the rest of it, which has precluded our typical approach of in-person meetings and so forth to solicit input. We have had input from hundreds of people through the survey, as well as a number of different conversations, one-on-one and small groups. Stephanie will talk more about that in a couple of minutes. But we're, in terms of our compressed time frame, we're basically working towards completing a draft final plan by the end of this month of June, the end of the fiscal year FY20. And the reason for that is we're required to do that if we're going to be eligible for applying for these grants from the Division of Conservation Services at the state this year, this cycle, this summer. So that's sort of the basic time frame that we're working on. Stephanie will talk again in a few minutes about when the availability of the long draft plan, when that will go up online. So with that, I think I'll turn it over to Stephanie to give the presentation and the slides, and then we'll all manage question and answers after that. Stephanie.
Thank you, Jordy. I just wanted to note for the record that Lisa Reed has joined us. She's also
Very
here
good.
for the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Andy, and thank you, Jordy. I am Stephanie Danielson. I'm with the Beta Group. We're a consulting firm that has worked with many municipalities on their planning efforts like this. We've been working with the city's Planning and Parks Department, as both Andy and Jordy mentioned, over the past several months. The last time the open space plan was updated was in 2012. The reason we're here is to share the outcome of that process and to provide an opportunity for comment on the final plan. As Jordy just mentioned, the plan will be available through the city's website beginning on June 12th. And I'll talk more about that and how to make comments as we go through the presentation. So Andy touched a little bit on the purpose of an updated open space plan. I mean, one purpose is that there are certain grants that are available at the state level for parks and recreation projects, as well as for open space protection projects. In order to qualify for those grant opportunities, you need to have a current open space plan, an approved current open space plan on record with the Department of Conservation Services. In addition to that requirement, the ultimate purpose of these plans is to provide the city with a guidebook that helps the city make decisions about where to invest in its parks, how it's going to meet the recreational needs of the residents, and to identify what lands are important to protect. So when you look at the plan, you'll see that. We talk about the parks, we talk about the recreational facilities that exist in the city today, talk about what the needs are and wants and desires of the city for future opportunities, and then how those will be met. Next slide. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the process. We began in April. Jordy mentioned that this was a compressed time frame. There have been a number of steps that have been involved to get this to this point, including some soliciting input from Newburyport residents. As Jordy mentioned, this really was a bit of a challenge. Typically, that input is done through a couple of public input sessions where it's face-to-face. We get to meet people and we ask what they think is important and should be in the plan. Due to the COVID-19 social gathering restrictions, that wasn't possible. So we had to change tactics and do things virtually. The first virtual public meeting was hosted by the Parks Department on April 16th. That was publicized through the local print media, using social media outlets and extensive email communication, as well as through a news item on the city's website. Jordy mentioned that we met with and talked with, and again, met was virtually, a number of key stakeholders from the community, including representatives of different and relevant boards and committees. And then to make sure we reached as broad a group of people as we could, we published a community survey. That was published on April 16th and was available for a period of 4 weeks. During that 4-week period, we received over 450 responses from residents. Next slide. So before we get into kind of what we heard about, heard from talking with stakeholders and from the surveys, I thought it would be helpful to just see what's been accomplished since 2012. This is a pretty impressive list of projects that were undertaken, many of them completed, some of them in process of being completed, but really quite notable. This is really an accomplishment to be proud of. Some of the highlights include a full renovation of the stadium at the high school, which included a new turf field. That new turf field has eased a lot of the pressure on the other playing fields in town and has allowed for those to go through periods of rest and receive the type of maintenance that they need so that they can continue to function better into the future. It also included completion of the Garrison multi-use path, which traverses the Whittier Bridge. A notable piece of information about that is that's the first such path, a multi-use path, a pedestrian and bicycle path, in the state that was constructed within an interstate highway layout. And then the city, a significant accomplishment, and one we heard a lot about, a lot of positive feedback, was the city created a dedicated parks department. And again, there was a lot of feedback about how people really realized and appreciated the work that that department was doing with some rehabilitation to the park areas and just doing regular maintenance that may not have been happening before. Next slide. This slide shows the areas in the city that provide recreation and open space opportunities for residents. The areas in green are state managed properties. You can see up here on the upper left side, that's Maudsley Park and the Curson Mills area. Everything that you see in pink is owned and managed by the city. Now there is one parcel that is identified in purple. Purple are areas that are owned and managed by a land trust. There's one parcel on the map that is owned by the city, but has a conservation restriction held by a land trust. When we asked what people valued and why people came and chose to live in Newburyport, they talked a lot about the natural beauty that exists here. They talk about the unique landscape that Newburyport offers in a natural setting. You have wet meadows, beautiful expanses of wet meadows. There are forested woodlands. You have riverfront areas and coastal waterfront areas, as well as coastal dunes. And that really adds to the unique character of the city. They also like the proximity to neighborhood parks and recreation areas. And it really created what you heard, the sentiment that we heard through their responses was, this really gave people a sense of place and a sense of community and belonging. Next slide. So when we asked people specifically what they valued in the park, again, a lot of this is what they echoed, what they valued about living in Newburyport. First and foremost, wooded and open space areas. This contributes to the rural character of the city. That's something that, again, it makes Newburyport somewhat unique as a city in that, of course, you have densely developed areas, but you're surrounded by some beautiful natural resources. They really liked the mixed-use walking and playing areas. So these are your parks where people go, they go to stroll, they go to walk, and they know that they're going to see other people out there, people are going to be playing. Again, it kind of builds that sense of community. That's the sentiment that we get from this. Next slide. When we asked them what concerned them over open space or about open space in Newburyport, what came to the forefront was loss of open space. There's real concern that there are areas of natural sensitive resource areas that are under pressure of development. And there are concerns about loss of that space. Also habitat disturbance and change. One of the examples that we heard a couple of times through this process was concern over pollinator habitat. That's something that's been in the news a lot lately. Our bee population is declining and other pollinating insects, which are important to, one, keep our vegetation, whether it's trees, it's plants, keep them all healthy, but also for food production. So, and also just as part of this effort, Beta did an on-site, we did an inventory and we visited all the different areas that are managed by the town. And I can tell you, going out into the wooded areas and the open fields, you have a lot of wildlife, a lot of bird activity, and that really adds to the value of your natural spaces. We asked people if they thought that the city's supply of recreation and open space recreation areas and parks was sufficient. They indicated that they felt that the city had an adequate supply of playgrounds, neighborhood parks, and hiking trails. Where they felt there was a need was with water-related activities. This seemed to focus on small boat activities, swimming, and just water views. Areas for winter sports, such as ice skating and water skiing. And then a need for outdoor play areas for team sports. This did not include recreation like athletic fields, such as baseball or soccer fields, but really was more related to areas where you could have pickup basketball games or play tennis, or even just open fields that people could run and play in or play Frisbee. Next slide. So again, taking all that information that we received into consideration and reviewing the 2012 plan to see what parts of that plan were still relevant, these were the goals that were developed. The first is protect the lands and public conservation and recreation interests of the city. Those that define the scenic heritage landscapes, the areas that support wildlife and ecosystems and the diversity of ecosystems. Water quality protection, we're talking about protecting water source through watershed lands in your drinking water supply, as well as open water bodies. A lot of naturalized areas provide flood management and flood control, which is really important with the types of extreme weather events that we've been seeing recently. And they provide some level of climate resiliency through the other values that they provide, like flood management, like water quality protection, but also areas of respite when we have extreme weather conditions and extreme heat. And they provide a range of passive and active recreational opportunities, such as nature observation, bird watching, again, just being able to go out in a quiet space and get away from the hubbub of your everyday life is of value. The second goal was maintain a high quality of parks and the recreation areas, and making sure that they're safe, that they're attractive, and that they provide a range of activities or opportunities for all residents. I mentioned that the creation of the dedicated Parks Department was very positively received, and that people are really looking forward to more maintenance and upkeep of the facilities. We also heard that there is a need to make these areas more accessible to people with disabilities and mobility impairments. And then the final goal is to improve the connectivity between these spaces. That would apply to keeping your natural areas contiguous and trying to reduce fragmentation, which can introduce invasive species, can introduce insect infestations, or just help impair the system itself. It includes connections between neighborhoods and the park areas and hiking areas, and also increasing the public awareness of where these exist. When we did the survey and talked with people during the Parks Commission meeting, we showed all the open space and recreation areas that the city provides. And people definitely have areas that they're favorites. That's where they go all the time. They're very familiar with it. Might be close to home, but they like those areas. But they were also surprised at the number of other parks and open space areas that they just didn't know about. So increasing the awareness is important, both to ensure that people are really enjoying the areas, but also to build advocacy for future projects and protection. So that's kind of the summary of the project and where we're at. You could go to the next slide, Andy. So where we're at today, as I said earlier, we plan to publish the final draft plan to the city website on June 12th. And we are soliciting public comments between the 12th and the 19th. And the way that you can provide comments, aside from tonight, is through this email address, which is newburyportopenspaceplan@gmail.com. So again, that's newburyportopenspaceplan, no spaces, @gmail.com. Andy, do you want to take it from here?
Yes, thank you, Stephanie. So we're now going to open it up to public comment. Like I said, we have a few folks that are in the general public. If anybody there is interested in speaking, like I said, Zoom has a raise hand feature. If you'd like to just move your mouse down to the bottom of the screen and click on that button, we'll know that you're interested in speaking. You're also welcome to just listen to the comments of others. Just let us know that you're interested in speaking. We are happy to hear any comments you have on the plan, the goals, the recommendations that we are putting into the plan in this update, and any other priorities that you think we may have missed.
And Andy, if I may just say one thing, I will be taking notes. So if I don't catch something, I may ask you to, meaning anyone who's commenting, I'll ask them if they would repeat what they had said.
We have a few folks out there. Anybody interested in giving a comment on this? Any areas you think that are working well in the city and you want to see them, continue funded, better funded, and so forth? Not seeing any comments at this time, Stephanie. Maybe that means we're doing a good job with the open space and recreation efforts we're doing, but definitely appreciate the presentation you've given.
Well, thank you. And thank you, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to work with the city. It's really been quite a pleasure.
All right. Thank you, everybody. As Stephanie and Andy noted, there's multiple ways you all can get in touch with us if people have questions or comments that come up later on. whether it's through that dedicated Gmail address or whether it's contacting one of us directly through email. So again, if there's no questions or comments at this point, we'll close this out and we'll look towards finalizing the draft of the document and getting that up on the website in about a week or so, and looking for any comments at that point, and then finalizing it as much as we can. So thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you, Jordy.
Thank
Have a good evening, everybody.
Thank you. Good evening.
All right, goodbye.